Minister, now we're going to discuss the statements on the Garda Reserve. Minister Harris.
Thank you so much, Senators, and thank you very much for the opportunity to address the House in the matter, and thank you to Senator McDougall, who had been looking for this discussion. I know we've spoken about it, and I'm very grateful that we have the opportunity to explore this issue today. The first thing I'd like to do is begin by expressing my gratitude to the members of the Garda Reserve for their commitment and their dedication to community safety. The time volunteered by all reservists has been of huge benefit to their community since they were founded in 2006, indeed by the then Minister McDougall. The Reserve is an important resource to support the work of An Garda Síochána in the provision of a community-based policing service, and it provides an opportunity to people to give something back. The success of the Gardaí is only made possible through the dedication and the commitment of its members, and the Garda Reserve has further strengthened these links between our police service and our communities. As part of the Government's plan to modernise and strengthen An Garda Síochána, a policing service for our future, the Garda Commissioner has developed a Garda Reserve strategy which provides a roadmap for the development of this important service. The strategy, published in October 2021, is informed by an internal review of the Reserve and sets out key commitments, including recruitment, training and development, deployment, governance and evaluation. A priority is a new recruitment campaign, and I'm pleased to confirm to the Seanad this afternoon that a new recruitment campaign for members of the Garda Reserve will be held later this year, most likely in the month of November, and afoot of this, new members of the Garda Reserve will be appointed. The campaign will target a broad and inclusive range of candidates, and in keeping with the Reserve's role as a visible forum of community engagement. My department is currently engaging with An Garda Síochána on revisions to the regulations governing the Reserve ahead of the commencement of this recruitment process. The Garda Commissioner has established an implementation group and an oversight committee to ensure the Garda Reserve strategy delivers on its objectives. Another aim of this strategy is to ensure that members of the Reserve are fully supported by Garda management and that their role is recognised and promoted throughout the organisation. I think this is actually a very important point. It is important if we're going to expand the Garda Reserve, and we are, and we're going to recruit more members into the Garda Reserve, and we are, that we make sure that they are seen as a part of the overall team in terms of community safety, and that their role is valued, supported by management and promoted and recognised throughout the organisation. A briefing pack is being developed that will be available for all Garda personnel to increase organisational awareness of the Garda Reserve. An internal communication strategy will also be developed to support new processes and procedures as they're implemented, and it's intended that Reserve forums will be reintroduced to recognise their voluntary contribution and good work. I am assured that An Garda Síochána are committed to reinforcing organisational capacity to manage the Garda Reserve, and indeed during my time as Minister for Justice I've discussed this matter directly with the Garda Commissioner on a number of occasions. This will be done through the introduction of streamlined processes and procedures which will support the revised Garda Reserve policy document and embed the role of the Garda Reserve within the organisation. The contribution of Garda Reserves has been marked by the Government and the Garda Commissioner in recent years. In 2016, to mark the 10th anniversary of the first attestation of the Garda Reserves, the Commissioner introduced a certificate of appreciation for their long service. This certificate is signed by the Garda Commissioner and presented to each Reserve Garda after they've completed 10 years of service. Last year we marked the centenary of the formation of An Garda Síochána with a series of commemorative events across the country, and throughout the year special items were awarded which recognise the contribution each individual has made to lay the foundations for the success of An Garda Síochána. Members of the Garda Reserve received a special commemorative medal and a certificate which served as a reminder that the work they do is hugely appreciated by myself as Minister, by the Commissioner and by the people of Ireland. I'm assured by An Garda Síochána that consideration is being given to ensuring that the Garda Reserve can also serve as a pathway to future recruitment competitions for Garda members. And again, I think this is an interesting idea. It's not that you'd have to go from being a Garda Reserve to a member of An Garda Síochána, but if there is an individual in the Garda Reserve that would then like to go on to be a fully sworn member of An Garda Síochána and have a desire to progress to that position, that there would be a clear pathway in place. I think this pathway would further strengthen An Garda Síochána and perhaps provide a further incentive for people with the desire to help in their local community. Each of these are vital steps towards our goal of building stronger, safer communities. And I must say, as we move towards next year, where we'll establish a community safety partnership in each local authority area, that is a recognition by government that yes, the Gardaí have a major role to play in keeping communities safe, but so too do lots of other organisations, and so too does the community at large. I actually think that further strengthens and reinforces the need for a Garda Reserve and the role that they can play in their community. So I want to thank Seanad Éireann and members of the House for the opportunity to speak on this topic today. I'd like to express sincere thanks to members of the Garda Reserve for volunteering their time for the benefit of communities across the country. They provide a quality service, they support proactive policing, and they do represent a partnership between An Garda Síochána and the many communities they serve. This deep connection to communities and a commitment to service is embedded in the culture of An Garda Síochána, something which the Gardaí should be immensely proud of. While it's unfortunate the Garda Reserve numbers have dropped in recent years, this is a result of a number of factors, including, quite frankly, the understandable desire to prioritise Garda recruitment again after both the financial crisis and indeed the COVID pandemic. The Garda Commissioner has implemented a strategic plan to now see the Garda Reserve utilised to its full potential, and the upcoming recruitment campaign will provide an opportunity to strengthen the workforce, strengthen the Garda Reserve and help bring the total workforce closer to its target. So I'm really delighted to see a strong response now to Garda recruitment, to see more than 400 members, trainee members of An Garda Síochána either in Templemore or signed up to go into Templemore this year, that we'll be back this year with more Gardaí coming into Templemore, then retiring or resigning from the force, back into a period of growth in the Gardaí by the end of the year, back into annual recruitment campaigns, back to a situation where nearly 5,000 people have said, I want to be a member of An Garda Síochána in the last recruitment campaign. But just to be crystal clear from the government's point of view, the department's point of view and the Garda Commissioner's point of view, the Garda Reserve in a new recruitment campaign later this year plays a very important role in the overall policing picture in Ireland.
Thank you, Minister Harris. Senator Barry Ward.
Cormagat the Cahirli Gnivig, Curran Fulcherosa Ara, Aaron Overshaw, Hoiraha. Minister, I want to first start by echoing what you've said about recognising the contribution that members of the Garda Reserve make. I think it's one of those things that we can be very proud of in society, that there are so many individuals who are willing to do work that is unpaid and monetarily unrewarded, albeit that it comes with its own reward. But I think those people who step up, volunteer, put themselves forward for the Garda Reserve and are willing to walk a beat or to lend a hand or to be an extension of the long arm of the law, if it can be put in those terms, need to be recognised. And you've mentioned some of the ways in which they can be recognised. But I think, I've heard both sides of that coin, and there are some of them who feel that they aren't particularly respected by full-time members of An Garda Síochána. I've also heard some of them who have had a tremendously positive experience of the work that they've done, and by the same token, on the other side of the coin, I think some members of An Garda Síochána place great stock in the assistance that the members of An Garda Reserve can provide to them. Others perhaps doubt maybe the efficiency or the efficacy of the Garda Reserve. But I think whatever the case, I welcome what you have said about the fact that the Garda Reserve forms a part of the government's strategy to improve policing in this country. And I know that, that this is a debate, as you've said, that's been called for by Senator McDougall on a number of occasions. I also want to acknowledge the role he has had in the establishment of the Garda Reserve, because whether you are a serving member of An Garda Síochána, a member of the Garda Reserve, or a prospective member of the Garda Reserve, or an ordinary citizen like most of us, you must be able to recognise the value added that the Garda Reserve can bring. And I'm not 100% sure that it has brought that or has been allowed to bring that so far. And I know that numbers started out in 2016 when the reserve was originally set up at over 1,000 or 1,200 and has gone down quite substantially to maybe a quarter of that. But I welcome what you've said about a recruitment campaign to go into that. And I also welcome and acknowledge what the government has done in terms of funding and supporting An Garda Síochána and the €2.14 billion budget allocation for An Garda Síochána this year, which is a tremendously important commitment to policing in Ireland, and I think consistent with the policy objectives of the government in terms of improving policing. And of course, nearly 1.4 million of that is for the Garda Reserve. But I think we must also recognise how the Garda Reserve can be of assistance. So one of the other programmes that I was included in the budget, and I, without going into great detail about the expansion of An Garda Síochána, I do welcome the commitment to increase Garda numbers. And I have said on a number of occasions, you cannot have a Garda on every street corner, or everywhere you go. And in fact, we don't want that either, because that amounts to a police state, and that's not where we want to go. But we do need to have a critical mass of members from Garda Síochána to make sure that policing is effective and present. And we need to do that as much so that people don't have the experience of calling the guards and then waiting for a prolonged period of time for one to actually turn up. Well, this is one of the ways in which we can expand the reach of An Garda Síochána. But the other one that was mentioned specifically in the budget last year for this year was the civilianisation of certain functions within An Garda Síochána, the provision of 400 extra civilian staff who can do some of the administrative duties that come with being a member of An Garda Síochána. Because the reality is, we as a state and the government invests invests enormously in the training and expertise of members of Garda Síochána. They're training in Templemore, they're training with other agencies, including international agencies, so that they are expert in their field and they can deliver the service that we all hope and expect from them on the ground. It is wasteful to spend all that time and money training those people and then having them sitting behind desks in a Garda station, wherever that might be. The reality is that there is a role for those civilians to be at that desk to carry out the administrative functions. And even, I know myself from my own professional work with Gardaí in the criminal courts, the amount of time that is spent by uniformed members, if I can put it that way, dealing with the administration of going to court or filling out documents in preparation for court, statements, etc. All of that is work that can be helped and improved by civilians. And by the same token, if you think about the guard on the beat, his or her reach can be expanded by having a Garda reservist with him or her. So instead of having two fully trained, experienced guards on the beat, have one of them and have a Garda reserve assisting them, being with them, which therefore increases the visibility, which is almost half the battle in policing, because we know that crime is reduced when there are more Gardaí on the beat. We know that's the case because people, notwithstanding all of the talk about the importance of disincentivising crime, the reality is that if people think there is a Garda presence, if people think that they will be apprehended, if they think they will be caught involved in criminal activity, they are much less likely to engage in it. It's a function of human nature that if you think you're going to get caught, you're not going to do something wrong. So that is the primary principle underlying the increased visibility of policing. We see it on roads. Everybody who drives, even whether you're speeding or not, you slow down when you see the Garda car. That is the impact of that kind of visible policing. But the same is true in areas where there's antisocial behaviour, in areas where there are increased burglaries, and I recognise also the burglaries have fallen actually in the last year. But when you have guards on the street, it positively is reflected in the crime statistics for that area. And one of the key functions I think that can be there for members of the Garda Reserve is to expand that remit of Garda Síochána, to allow them to be more places than their numbers allow, particularly at peak times, at large events, at particular events that require particular policing, that you can match a Garda Reservist with a full-time, fully attested uniform Garda, and that way expand hugely the reach of Garda Síochána. But I agree with what you've said. I think there is huge scope here. We do need to work on it, and I welcome the recruitment campaign that you mentioned that I hope will expand the functions of those who are willing to volunteer.
Senator Michael McDowell.
Well, Laska Hirlik, I want to welcome the Minister here. I have been pressing for this debate for some time, and I just want to say a few things. When the Garda Reserve was originally canvassed in Dáil Éireann, it received all-party support. The one group who were opposed to it at the time were the GRA, and one of its officers said that he'd be waiting in the long grass for me as a result of establishing it, words which I think were unfortunate at the time. But unfortunately, many members of the reserve have found that there were people waiting in the long grass for them in Garda Síochána, and their experiences have been mixed, to say the very least. Some of them, as Senator Ward has said, have had good experiences because responsible and decent officers have encouraged them and made use of them. Others were marginalised, left alone, almost sent to Coventry in stations and made to feel that their presence was completely unwanted and that they were never going to be used. The consequences were that in 2009, at the end of the first year, there were 478 members. It grew to by 2014 to over 1,100 members, and from 2015 onwards there's been a steady decline: 900, 600, 500, 520, 458, 407, 425, and now we're in around 380 members. And the reason for that is that since 2015 there's been no recruitment whatsoever. And the Commissioner, who I have great time for, he recently published, or he didn't recently, in 2001, 2 years ago, a strategy document. And with the greatest will in the world and the best goodwill towards him, particularly in the world, it's waffle. There isn't mention of a single figure in it of how many Gardaí are proposed to be recruited. I understand that the government has now stated that 2,000 is their target figure. But I mean, it is extraordinary that when it was at 1,200, it was allowed to go down to 300. I just want to say one other thing to the Minister, and this is He's only here for a short period of time, and I welcome his initiative in coming here today to deal with this issue. But I mean, you know, this is a period in which volunteerism in Ireland generally has collapsed. And it isn't just a matter of retained firemen not being properly dealt with in rural areas. It's far broader than that. The Reserve Defence Force is now critically endangered. Its number of people who are actually turning up for training every year is a tiny fraction of what should be its strength. The FCA that was there one time was spread across Ireland. You could go to your local FCA depot and train. A mistake was made, in my view, and we've got now a situation where the number of people who actually could handle a weapon for the Irish state in the event of an emergency has dwindled to practically nothing outside the permanent defence forces, which themselves are suffering a crisis of recruitment and retention. And the same applies to civil defence. I was in here recently and there was a civil defence bill put before us. And in 2015, the website for civil defence said there were 4,500 people in it. I noted that they issued another strategy document along the lines of this document. And they said that at that stage, this was about 2 years ago, they had 3,500 members, so 1,000 had gone. And the minister introducing the bill here in the last fortnight had to confess that the number of civil defence volunteers now is less than 2,500. So right across the board in Ireland, those people who have volunteered to assist the Irish state with their spare time have found the situation unrewarding, is all I can say, and their dwindling numbers reflects, I think, a sad pattern of neglect of volunteerism right across the security services. I want to also just say one thing about the Garda Reserve. It is no threat to the living standards or the conditions of work or pay or anything else of any full-time member of an Garda Síochána. And anybody who thinks it is deluding themselves. Secondly, one thing about the transformation in policing in Ireland that is clear over the last century is that An Garda Síochána is losing its local roots. You can be in a rural town and people can be patrolling you at night in a squad car from 30 miles away, and they don't know anybody in the town, and very few people in the town would know them. That's the sad fact at this stage. And the presence of Garda reservists right across the country, and I'm not just talking about rural Ireland, I'm talking about places like the suburbs of Dublin, Tala, Donnybrook, wherever it has to be, the presence of reservists gives to An Garda Síochána some presence locally and some, if it's done properly, some capacity to know what is happening on the ground in communities other than at the wrong end of an incident or whatever, or the wrong end of a reported crime. So I just want to say to the Minister, thank you for coming in today. Time is limited, but I do want to say this. The pattern of neglect is so obvious, and the mistreatment of so many reservists was so painful to them, and the failure to recruit over the last 7 years has been so inexplicable that we must now deliver on this promise to get the Garda Reserve up to 2,000, and it has to be done smartly, and it will require, I've finished on this point, I'll ask you here, look, it will require somebody in the Phoenix Park whose sole job it is to ensure that the reserve operates, whose sole job is to make sure that reservists are treated properly, and whose sole job it is to make a success of what could be a hugely important aspect of policing in Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McDougall. Senator Robbie Gallagher.
And Minister, I'd like to welcome you back to the House this afternoon, and at the outset I might like to take this opportunity to thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to come down to County Monaghan last Monday. You were down there to lend your support, number one, to the crew that's there, that's digging for the remains of young Columba McVeigh, and indeed to the McVeigh family who were also present there last Monday as they continue on their heartbreaking journey to try and locate the remains of their beloved Columba. And it was difficult to reconcile the beauty of the day that was, the sun shining high in the sky, the beauty that is Bragan Mountain itself. It was difficult to reconcile the activity that was going on there that day, in that people were digging for the remains of a 19-year-old who was brutally murdered back in 1974. And I would like to use this opportunity to appeal again to anyone, like you did there last Monday, with any information whatsoever, however insignificant they may feel that it is, to please come forward, knowing that the information given is going nowhere. There's no risk whatsoever of any prosecution resulting therefrom, so that the McVeigh's family's nightmare will finally come to an end, and they'll get an opportunity to lay the remains of young Columba with that of his parents, and that was his mother's dying wish, that the family would strive, as long as they were alive, to ensure that the remains will be found, and please God, that will be the outcome, and we hope that the search that's there at the moment will be successful, and that the McVeigh family will have their wish. As you said on Monday, it's very rare that people would look forward to a wake or a funeral, but as the sister of Columba said on Monday, that's exactly what they are looking forward to. So I wish them well, and I thank you again personally for that regard. In relation to the matter before us here this afternoon, I would like to pay tribute to my colleague here, Senator McDowell, who was the brains behind this initiative back a number of years ago, and it had certainly merit then, and it definitely has even more merit today, one would argue. And I know from a Fianna Fáil point of view, we're very pro the Garda Reserve. We, like others, feel that there is serious potential in the Garda Reserve, and it's disappointing that it hasn't been the success that I'm sure the then Minister McDowell had certainly hoped that it would be. And unfortunately, as he outlined himself, the figures, Minister, speak for themselves. Back in 2014, there was 1,143 reserves with 84 people in training. 7 years on, in 2021, that figure had tumbled to 372 members. So clearly there's a serious problem there. Some members have already outlined what they feel the problem is, but I welcome the fact that our recruitment campaign will be underway in the third quarter of this year, which is only a number of months away now. But I think it's important that we take this opportunity perhaps to reflect on what exactly has gone wrong in its entirety with the Garda Reserve. And I'm wondering if such an audit has taken place along a couple of headlines. Number one is to try and explain why the figures have plummeted to the degree that they have. Also, from a value of money perspective, have we seen value for money in relation to the Garda Reserve? Clearly, the figures would indicate that we have a serious problem here. Another question that springs to mind is I understand from inquiries I've made in anticipation of this debate that the majority of people that signed up, and perhaps Senator McDowell might be able to add further clarity to this, most of them were in full-time employment. And the question was asked, where does that stand in relation to somebody that wants to volunteer to be a Garda Reserve in relation to the Working Time Directive? Does that exist? Does that cover that? I certainly would welcome your comments on that. But the whole concept, as Senator Ward outlined, crime prevention is what it's all about. And I think the more Gardaí we have in the streets, the better it is. And if we can supplement the number of Gardaí there by Garda Reserve members, then I think it's a win-win for everybody. I think anybody that volunteers for such a role, then we are deeply indebted to those people for providing and giving of their time freely for the benefit of the state and for the safety of the individuals that live within that state. So I very much welcome the debate here this afternoon, and I thank Senator McDowell, who has voiced his concerns about the Garda Reserve on numerous occasions within this chamber. But I think before we go headbang into our recruitment campaign, we need to press the pause button for a second and make sure that we do a full review of the history of the Garda Reserve since its inception to the present day, to find out where the problems are and why the numbers have plummeted to the degree that it has. it is, from the Gardaí I spoke to, it certainly is bedding in well. I think there's serious pluses all round, but we need to ensure that when we do look for additional people to join by way of a recruitment campaign at the end of the year, we need to know where it's fallen down to date.
Thank you, Senator. And before I call on Senator Boyne, I just want to welcome Deputies Kieran Cannon and Deputy Cahillberry and their guests. I hope you enjoy your afternoon here. Senator Boylan.
I'm just speaking on behalf of Senator O'Donnell today. Although we've heard statements on the need to recruit to the Garda Reserve, I think the focus of the comments that Sinn Féin will focus on is the recruitment to the full-time Garda, and that's in no way to relegate the reserve element of An Garda Síochána, but the policing operation that is required to deal with the multifaceted threat by criminals to the people of this state is to be found in the operational capability of the full-time police, and full-time Garda numbers are of serious concern, and it is my view that the government does not have a considered plan to increase numbers in the full-time force. We need a well-trained and professional policing service to protect people. The Future of Policing report was very clear on the issue that recruitment to the reserve must be paused until a strategic review has been carried out, and Sinn Féin supports this view. There are many pressures on the resources of the Gardaí, not least the duties which arise from its administration responsibilities, which are essential for the police to perform to ensure it is providing a first-class and effective service based on integrity and accountability. And these pressures have grown as society has changed and the criminal threat has changed. Resources are required to ensure that the administration is operating at its maximum potential, and the administration, in my view, must have a first call on available resources. I don't think it is advisable for administrative duties to be carried out by reservists because they will be removed from other important areas of work. The Future of Policing report also said that the reserve would only work if they were valued by the full-time policing service and if reservists were committed to their role. Given the increase in work hours, precarious employment and the current cost of living crisis, it is unclear how we can expect to recruit large numbers of people with the time and commitment to these roles. The Commission also mentioned other ways of engaging the public in policing work, and I think that these should also be explored. A few weeks ago, Deputy Pa Daly, Sinn Féin spokesperson on justice, spoke about the recruitment and retention crisis that must be addressed. His comments followed the release of figures from the Garda Representatives Association that show that An Garda Síochána failed to reach its target in the latest recruitment drive. This is the second occasion in as many months that the Garda recruitment numbers were not met, and there is concern that the police service is understaffed, and this should have consequences for the protection and safety of the people who need the service of the Gardaí. It is important that the government respond to these concerns and ensure its policies are not contributing to a climate of uncertainty about the effectiveness of An Garda Síochána in carrying out its duties.
Senator Mark Wall, please.
Minister, I want to welcome you into the House this afternoon. The Garda Reserve was of course launched by then Minister and current Senator McDowell with a view to bolstering policing in the Republic. The intention, we were told at the time, was the unpaid reservists could aid full-time Garda members during their duties and in some cases free them up for the most basic of tasks, thus helping to boost frontline policing. I too want to acknowledge, as other members of the House today, that Senator McDowell has raised this very important matter on a number of occasions in this House. The Garda Reserve as a concept has worked well in other countries, aiding policing at major events, for example, but now we are told, and again confirmed today, that the numbers have fallen below 400 and that recruitment, confirmed by Minister Harris, will not begin and not open until the end of this year and into the next. It has already been said, Minister, one of the key principles in policing anywhere in the world is and has always been visibility. I'm sure, like other members of this House, I am regularly told by so many people that we need Gardaí back on the streets, back walking amongst our communities. The Garda Reserve could have a crucial role to play in this visibility. I'm aware locally of the excellent community guard we have in Kildare. Our local community guard, Sean O'Mahony, is part of every community event in the area, offering advice, support and bringing the Guard to the community in the way that these people I mentioned previously want to see Gardaí in their community. Unfortunately for us all in the area where I live, there is only one Garda O'Mahony. And that, Minister, as others have said, is why I think we need to do more with recruitment and indeed retention of the Reserve Garda. They could assist our community Gardaí, offering further links to our communities, from our communities to Gardaí services. They could be the ones walking our streets, given that visibility that so many people are seeking at this time. They could be the ones assisting our community Gardaí with community events and expanding the social offerings of all of our communities. Having somebody at a community meeting that can give you the security advice, link in with traffic police and civil defence is crucial in promoting our communities and ensuring that we have integration and social cohesion in all our communities. Other members have mentioned, it would be remiss of me not to mention as well, Minister, and to use the opportunity to once again put out a call for additional Gardaí in the area where I live, it's Kildare South, for the reasons I've just mentioned, but also for the following. The population of Kildare from the recently announced census in the last couple of days is 247,774. We are now part of the Laois Offaly area, whose combined population is 175,027, or some 72,000 less than Kildare's. Yet Kildare has still one of the lowest Garda numbers per head of population in the entire country. It is time to redistribute the Garda we have, Minister, to reflect the growth in County Kildare and reduce that per head of population. In a recent PQ to my Labour colleague Sean Sherlock, we learned that only one probationary Garda had been allocated to the Athy station in 8 years. This may have something to do with the definition of a training station, but it needs to change, Minister. In total, Kildare received 177 out of a national total of 4,029, of which the Athy station, as I've already mentioned, received 1. The fourth largest county by population in Ireland is receiving less than 5% of the probationary Gardaí in this country. I know you will tell me in your reply, Minister, that it is a matter for the Garda Commissioner, but as Minister for Justice and Deputy Minister for Justice and Minister for State at the Department of Justice, I ask once again that this urgently be raised with him. In conclusion, you will see why somebody from County Kildare would welcome more reserve Gardaí. The Gardaí we have, as I've always said in this House, do a magnificent job. As I've always said, they are stretched beyond their limits, and something needs to change in my county to urgently reflect the population that's there. The Garda Reserve can and will and should play a part in that. Recruitment and retention is part of that. As has already been said, it's an issue we have in our defence forces. We can't allow it to obstruct the growth in Garda Reserve's numbers. I do support the call as well that before we start recruitment, Minister, as my colleague has said, we need to know why it is reduced from 1,500 or 2,000 high down to the less than 400 before we start asking people to join again. The volunteerism that's been mentioned by Senator McDowell is a problem that I come across, and I'm sure you come across every day in all our communities. So we can't let that be the obstacle to Reserve Gardaí. But what we need, and what we're all calling for today, is more Gardaí on the beat. The Reserve Garda has a role to play in that, and that's an issue that the government should take on. Recruitment should be driven as quickly as possible, but we also need to know why we've dropped so drastically from those high numbers of 2015 to where we are today. So once again, Lascairloch, the Labour Party supports the call, welcomes the debate, supports the Gardaí in everything they do in the community, but there is a need for more community-based Gardaí. There is a need for a Reserve Gardaí to support those community Gardaí on the beat once again.
Senator Aisling Dolan.
Thank you. Very much appreciate your time, and thank you to the Minister and to Minister Harris, who was here earlier. Again, just to welcome the statements here, and I mean speaking on the strategy, and as you've pointed out here in your opening statement, that it's around the key commitments around recruitment, training, development, deployment, governance and evaluation. Again, as has been mentioned by colleagues here, of course, recruitment is the key, and I suppose just around both Garda Reserve, and I really appreciate as well the highlighting here of the diversity of our Garda Reserve members would be really crucial in our communities today. I think that would be a great way to bring more new communities involved and part of the Gardaí and Garda Síochána. Again, just if I may, just to highlight the challenges around recruitment, as has been spoken about. There definitely has to be a better bank of knowledge and understanding why. Obviously, we have a labour force, the highest ever amount of people ever working in Ireland. Our population is increasing and people are busier and busier. And of course, the time that can be given to voluntary type activities has reduced. But I suppose I'm also looking at the numbers around recruitment in Garda Síochána and the importance of ensuring that we have a very good, strong recruitment campaign particularly for young people in our schools, in our secondary schools, around career guidance, perhaps with transition year? Is there more that we can be doing, I suppose, through An Garda Síochána in linking in with our educational system as well, and about the opportunities for young people? And also, I suppose, the long-term career when you are involved in An Garda Síochána, like the career paths that are available. People might have a very stereotypical view of a Garda, but there are so many different activities that Gardaí are involved in, and how they engage with their community, and how they're such a strong part of our local communities. I suppose, Minister, I very much support again the idea of the deployment of the Garda Reserve. I suppose another challenge we're seeing, particularly on Garda Síochána, is around the difficulty with transfers because of the low numbers, and the challenges around Garda being able to transfer from one section to another. And again, I suppose that is one that is causing difficulty for Garda barracks across the country. You know, been able to get staff in, particularly with the new model and so on. So I just think that is one of those other areas that we do need to look at, so that we can support transfers where possible, but also that we need higher recruitment numbers. And the communication policy by Garda Síochána, and Minister, I don't know if you'd like to comment on that, but how and what types of communication are we using around that recruitment? Would you have any ideas or comments on that yourself, about how either that can be improved, or what other sort of social media tools can we use? And the value, I remember during the lockdown, I can't remember the song, but you might remember that Gardaí across the country were taking part in sort of a song across the country in all different parts, you know, showcasing our beautiful countryside. For the life of me, I cannot remember the name of the song, but I just remember that it just brought a lot of, at a time of extreme difficulty, it just made people smile, and just really see that there is a great sense of community within our guards as well, and that's really something that's a value. It's a vocation, like a lot of things, being a guard, and I think we really need to value it as such. And maybe that value, the recognition, like you speak here, medals for people in the Garda Reserve, that recognition is so important. And Gurmila Maga, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I'd like to welcome the Coachford School in Cork in this afternoon. You're all very welcome, and I hope you have a lovely day here visiting Leinster House. Now, Minister, if you'd like to address.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and I thank the Chair and the members of the House for the opportunity to speak on this topic today. Once again, I would like to express sincere thanks to the members of the Garda Síochána's Reserve for volunteering their time to the benefit of the communities right across the country. They provide a quality service, support proactive policing, and represent a partnership between An Garda Síochána and the many communities they serve. This deep connection to communities and a commitment to service is embedded in the culture of An Garda Síochána, and is something to be immensely proud of. While it is unfortunate that Garda Reserve numbers have dropped in recent years, this is as a result of a number of factors, including the understandable decision to prioritise the recruitment of Garda members. The Garda Commissioner has implemented a strategic plan to see the Garda Reserve utilised to its full potential. The upcoming recruitment campaign will provide an opportunity to strengthen the Garda Reserve and help bring the total workforce closer to its target. As you can all appreciate, the management of Garda resources, including recruitment, training and deployment of Garda members and the Garda Reserve, is the responsibility of the Garda Commissioner. My department has been engaging with An Garda Síochána in advance of the launch of this recruitment campaign, and will continue to do so in the coming months. It is also hugely important that there is a real diversity in the Garda Reserves, so that they can better reflect the communities they represent. It is essential that this diversity is seen, and the recruitment campaign will target a broad and an inclusive range of candidates. The development and strengthening of the Garda Reserve is all part of the wider strategy to ensure communities around Ireland are safe and feel safe. At the heart of this is a strong Garda Síochána, and the Government is fully committed to providing it with the resources needed to deliver on its objective of keeping people safe. This has been reflected in the unprecedented allocation of over €2 billion in Budget 2023. For the past 100 years, An Garda Síochána have formed bonds with the communities they serve, and this emphasis in community policing is no better reflected than with the Garda Reserve. That connection with the community is something to treasure and should not be taken for granted. I was delighted to see such a strong response to the most recent Garda recruitment campaign, which is a testament to the enduring popularity of a career in An Garda Síochána. And I am confident that the personal motivation displayed by so many to give back to their community and others will have a favourable impact on the response to the next Garda Reserve campaign. Thank you, Carla.
The statements are concluded. Can I ask the acting leader to move the suspension of the House until 4 p.m? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Not agreed.
We've had 2 ministers in the House today.
Yes.
Not one number has been mentioned to us as to how many people they intend to recruit from Garda Reserve, and that's a shame. So I'm not agreeable to the adjournment.
Would you like to speak further on the statements?
I don't think I'm entitled to under the rules of the House, but I do think, that it's amazing that I've been campaigning here for 2 years and not one figure, not even one target, has been mentioned in the course of the afternoon, and that's a real shame. I withdraw my objection to the adjournment.
Thank you very much for that, Senator McDougall, because I actually wouldn't know what to do if you didn't do that. Okay, so is it agreed that we suspend the House until 4 p.m? The House stands suspended until 4 p.m. Thank you.